The autumn of 1944 brought a bitter freezing rain to the shattered ancient city of Aachen. It was the first major German city to be assaulted by the Allied forces, and the urban landscape had been completely pulverized by weeks of continuous heavy artillery bombardments and tactical airstrikes. For the German infantry defending the rubble, the tactical reality was entirely defined by desperation and close-quarters survival. The German High Command, desperately short of operational panzer divisions, had fundamentally shifted the burden of anti-tank defense onto the shoulders of the individual infantrymen. The primary weapons of this new doctrine were the Panzerfaust and the Panzerschreck shoulder-fired shaped charge weapons capable of penetrating the armor of any Allied tank. The doctrine relied entirely on the concept of the urban ambush. German soldiers were instructed to hide within the ruined basements behind the thick stone walls of the shattered cathedrals and in the deep craters that cratered the cobblestone streets. They had to remain perfectly still, completely invisible, waiting for the American armored columns to advance into their pre-sighted kill zones. The theoretical logic of the ambush was sound, based on the traditional vulnerabilities of armored vehicles in confined spaces. A tank is inherently blind, its crew buttoned up behind thick steel, relying on narrow vision slits to navigate. A tank is loud, its approach masking the sound of the defending infantry moving into position. And traditionally a tank was slow to react, requiring precious seconds for the commander to spot a target, relay the coordinates to the gunner, and manually crank the heavy turret into alignment. But as the veteran German grenadier quickly discovered in the bloody street fighting of Aachen and the dense hedgerows of Normandy, the American medium tank, the M4 Sherman, completely defied every established paradigm of armored vulnerability. The German infantrymen hiding in the ruins learned at a catastrophic cost that attempting to ambush an American tank platoon was not a tactical advantage but an invitation to immediate localized annihilation. To understand why the American armored columns were so impossibly difficult to ambush, one must entirely discard the post-war cinematic myths that portray the M4 Sherman as a fragile undergunned machine. While it may have lacked the thick frontal armor and high-velocity anti-tank gun of the German Panther or Tiger, the Sherman was an absolute masterpiece of automotive engineering, ergonomic design, and anti-infantry lethality. It was a vehicle designed specifically not for tank-on-tank duels but for the exploitation of breakthroughs and the systematic destruction of enemy strongpoints and infantry. The foundational element that made the Sherman so deadly in an ambush scenario was its unparalleled situational awareness. Unlike German tanks, which often suffered from severe blind spots and inferior peripheral optics, the Sherman was equipped with a brilliant array of periscopes. The tank commander sitting in the turret was provided with a rotating cupola featuring multiple glass vision blocks that afforded a complete 360-degree field of view without ever having to expose his head to sniper fire. The gunner, the driver, and the assistant driver were all equipped with high-quality prismatic periscopes. This meant that an American tank crew had a vastly superior chance of spotting a hidden anti-tank team in the rubble long before the tank entered the lethal 30-yard range of the early Panzerfaust. But spotting the enemy was only the first fraction of the tactical equation. The true terror for the German infantrymen lay in what happened the very millisecond an American tank crew detected a threat. The response was not a slow, cumbersome mechanical process, it was a violently instantaneous reaction orchestrated by the most advanced communication network on the battlefield. Every single American tank, regardless of its specific variant, was equipped with a state-of-the-art frequency-modulated radio system, typically the SCR-508 or the SCR-528. These radios were crystal-controlled, meaning the crews did not have to constantly tune dials to find a signal, they simply pushed a button to lock onto the precise platoon frequency. The communication was static-free and completely instantaneous. If the lead tank in an American column spotted a German soldier moving in a third-story window or caught the brief flash of a Panzerschreck in a basement, the commander did not just engage the target, he immediately broadcast the exact coordinates over the platoon net. Within 1 second of the initial sighting, every other tank in the formation was instantly aware of the ambush. There was no reliance on signal flags, no shouting out of hatches, and no confusion. The American tanks operated not as isolated steel boxes but as a single synchronized hive mind of heavy firepower. The mechanical reality of the American response was the single most devastating factor that broke the back of the German anti-tank infantry. When a German soldier armed with a Panzerfaust recognized that he had been spotted, his only hope for survival was to fire his weapon before the tank could bring its main gun to bear. Against a Soviet T-34 or a German Panzer IV, this was often a viable tactic as their turrets were traversed by slow electric motors or hand cranks requiring significant time to rotate the gun onto a flank target. The M4 Sherman, however, was equipped with the oil gear hydraulic traverse mechanism or in some models a specialized Loganspurt electric system. The engineering tolerances of these American traverse systems were completely unmatched by anything in the Axis or Soviet arsenals. When the Sherman commander spotted a target on his right flank, he simply grabbed a specialized pistol grip override control and squeezed the trigger. The massive hydraulic pressure instantly unlocked the turret ring and spun the heavy steel turret with terrifying velocity. A Sherman could complete a full 360-degree rotation in less than 15 seconds. The turret moved so fast that it could literally snap the neck of a careless crewman standing in the basket. For the German infantryman aiming his Panzerfaust from a ruined window, the sight was absolutely paralyzing. He would spot the American tank completely facing the wrong direction, believe he had the element of surprise, and prepare to pull the firing lever. In the blink of an eye, the massive turret would violently whip around the long barrel of the 75mm gun, locking directly onto his position before he could even process the mechanical movement. This terrifying speed of target acquisition was further enhanced by the gyrostabilizer, a piece of highly classified technology developed by the Westinghouse Corporation that was standard equipment on the Sherman tank. While the gyrostabilizer was primarily designed to allow the tank to fire its main gun accurately while moving across rough terrain, its true value in urban combat and ambush scenarios was its ability to keep the gun barrel perfectly level and locked onto the target area regardless of the tank's sudden braking or pivoting. When the driver slammed on the brakes to halt the tank upon spotting an ambush, the heavy gun barrel did not dip violently toward the earth as it did in every other tank of the era. The gyroscope instantly compensated for the pitch of the hull, keeping the optical sights perfectly aligned. The gunner did not have to waste precious seconds reacquiring the target, adjusting the elevation handwheel, and waiting for the suspension to settle. The tank could go from a full driving speed to a dead halt and fire a perfectly aimed high-explosive shell into a basement window in a single fluid motion. The German anti-tank teams, relying on the assumption that a moving tank was a blind and inaccurate target, were repeatedly annihilated by American gunners who could place a shell exactly where they wanted it the very second the tracks stopped churning the mud. The lethality of the American response was entirely dictated by the specific type of ammunition loaded in the breech of the 75mm M3 gun. The Sherman was not primarily loaded with armor-piercing rounds, it carried a massive payload of the M48 high-explosive shell. The American 75mm high-explosive round was arguably one of the most effective anti-personnel munitions of the entire Second World War. It possessed a bursting charge that was significantly larger and more powerful than the high-explosive shells fired by the high-velocity 75mm gun of the German Panther, or even the massive 88mm gun of the Tiger. The American shell was engineered for maximum blast effect and fragmentation, designed to shatter concrete buildings, tear through timber bunkers, and completely obliterate unarmored infantry. When the rapid traverse of the Sherman turret locked onto a suspected ambush position, the gunner did not hesitate to fire the M48 shell. If a German soldier was hiding in a brick building, the American tank did not need to hit the soldier directly. The gunner simply fired the high-explosive shell into the wall of the building. The point-detonating super-quick fuse on the nose of the shell would trigger the main charge the millisecond it struck the masonry. The resulting explosion would not only blast lethal steel shrapnel through the interior of the room, but it would turn the shattered bricks and stone of the building itself into thousands of secondary high-velocity projectiles. The concussive overpressure inside the confined space of a basement or an urban room was instantly fatal, completely rupturing the internal organs of any defending infantryman caught within the blast radius. But the 75mm gun was only the primary instrument of the American anti-infantry meat grinder. The secondary armament of the M4 Sherman was absolutely devastating and was entirely responsible for completely suppressing the German infantry attempting to execute an ambush. The Sherman was equipped with a coaxial 30 caliber M1919 machine gun mounted right next to the main gun in the turret, and another 30 caliber machine gun mounted in the bow, operated by the assistant driver. These weapons, fed by thousands of rounds of linked ammunition, could lay down a continuous sheet of suppressing fire into any suspected enemy position. But the true psychological and physical terror for the German soldier was the weapon mounted on the very top of the turret, the legendary Browning M2 heavy barrel 50 caliber machine gun. This weapon was originally designed as an anti-aircraft gun, but American tank commanders quickly realized its profound value in urban and hedgerow combat. The .50 caliber bullet is a massive heavy projectile traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second. It does not merely suppress enemy infantry, it completely obliterates their cover. A German soldier hiding behind a thick brick wall, a massive oak tree, or the sandbags of a fortified trench line was completely protected from the standard rifle fire of the American infantry. But when the tank commander standing in the open hatch of his Sherman turned the .50 caliber heavy machine gun onto that position, the cover was instantly pulverized. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds would smash right through the brickwork, shatter the heavy timber, and tear the defending soldier apart. The sheer volume of fire, the concussive hammering noise of the heavy Browning, and the terrifying visual impact of the large caliber tracers tearing through the masonry created a suppressive environment that completely paralyzed the German anti-tank teams. The physical reality of the Panzerfaust weapon further doomed the German ambush attempts. The Panzerfaust was a recoilless weapon, meaning that when the firing mechanism ignited the propellant charge, it exhausted a massive, violently hot backblast out the rear of the launch tube to counteract the forward recoil of the heavy warhead. This backblast extended for nearly 10 feet behind the operator. In the open field this was dangerous, but in the confined spaces of an urban environment or the thick, dense brush of the hedgerows it was a catastrophic liability. A German soldier firing a Panzerfaust from inside a room had to ensure that the rear wall was sufficiently far away, otherwise the backblast would completely incinerate him and his comrades in the enclosed space. Furthermore, the moment the weapon was fired, it generated a massive, highly visible cloud of gray smoke and a brilliant flash of fire. If the German soldier missed his shot, or if the shaped charge failed to penetrate the thick, sloped frontal armor of the Sherman, his position was instantly and unmistakably compromised. He had entirely given away his location to a network of American tanks that possessed the rapid traverse, the high explosive firepower, and the instantaneous radio communication required to execute an immediate lethal counterattack. There was no time to reload, there was no time to run. The heavy machine guns and the 75mm high-explosive shells would converge on the smoke cloud within seconds, reducing the building and the anti-tank team to pulverized rubble. The final element that made the American tanks completely impossible to ambush was the fundamental American tactical doctrine of combined arms. Despite the Hollywood depictions of lone tanks wandering through enemy territory, an American tank was practically never deployed without a heavy escort of armored infantry. The mechanized infantry battalions riding in their M3 half-tracks operated in absolute symbiosis with the armored columns. The infantry protected the tanks from the hidden anti-tank teams, and the tanks provided the overwhelming heavy firepower to destroy the fortified enemy positions. This coordination was eventually perfected through the implementation of a brilliant piece of field expedient engineering known as the grunt phone or the infantry telephone. The ordnance crews in the field took a standard field telephone, attached it to a spool of communication wire, and mounted it securely to the rear fender of the Sherman tank, connecting it directly to the internal intercom system of the tank crew. This simple modification revolutionized tactical coordination in the most dangerous environments of the war. An American infantryman advancing behind the massive steel bulk of the Sherman, spotting a German soldier shifting in the rubble 100 yards away, did not have to try to get the tank commander's attention by waving his arms or throwing rocks at the turret. He simply picked up the handset from the rear fender, pressed the button, and spoke directly into the headphones of the tank commander sitting inside the sealed turret. The infantryman could give precise coordinates, calling out a target in the third-floor window of the red brick building on the left. The tank commander, receiving the exact location in his headset, would immediately direct the gunner utilize the rapid hydraulic traverse to snap the turret onto the target and obliterate the position with a high explosive shell before the German soldier ever knew he had been spotted. The historical record left by the German infantry commanders during the campaigns in Western Europe is filled with a profound, terrifying respect for the American armored doctrine. They recognized that the American tanks did not fight as individual machines, they fought as an integrated, hyper-responsive system of absolute violence. The German tactical manuals, which had successfully dictated the rules of armored engagement during the early years of the war against the rigid doctrines of the French and the British, were completely useless against the technological and tactical flexibility of the American Sherman. The combination of the crystal-clear FM radios, the lightning-fast hydraulic turret traversed the devastating anti-personnel capability of the 50-caliber machine gun and the immense explosive power of the M48 shell created a combat vehicle that was perfectly adapted to surviving and dominating the chaotic, unpredictable environment of close-quarters combat. For the German grenadier shivering in the freezing ruins of Aachen, clutching a short-range anti-tank weapon and listening to the low mechanical rumble of the approaching Continental radial engines, the realization was absolute. If he fired and missed, he was dead. If he was spotted before he fired, he was dead. The American tanks were not blind lumbering targets, they were highly organized lethal predators possessing the mechanical speed and the overwhelming firepower to instantly crush any attempt at an ambush, completely redefining the terrifying reality of infantry combat in the Second World War.